Hello, my name is Skyler Baxley, and I'm here with Elaine and Blair. We're just going to discuss some of our experiences in church music. Let's just kind of discuss how we were raised or how we grew up in church and how music was a part of that.
So this is Elaine, and I am the oldest one here. So I feel like my experience growing up in church was a little different from younger people. I was raised as a preacher's kid in a Methodist church, a small Methodist church, by parents who were highly influenced by Southern gospel. So our church music experience mirrored our home music experience. I was raised at convention sings where they sing Seven Note Shapes music, convention style. So I know that wasn't at church, but it was it bled into our church experience. It was integral. It was our family. That's family. That's home. When I hear that music now, if I'm really stressed out, I put that in. The Gaithers is probably the closest thing to that. Still not really the style, but it's kind of the closest thing. So how that interpreted itself in our church was everyone knew how to read music. Everyone sang harmonies. Everyone knew what the shapes meant and what the time signatures meant. We had people bringing their own tambourines to church. It was a crazy time. So growing up in church, I've never found that again. I feel like as time has progressed, that people have lost their knowledge of music. And in seeing the contemporary swing happening in the 80s into the 90s, we don't know music anymore. So I feel like a lot of the heart of church music has become shallow, because you don't hear the harmonies in church anymore, and you don't kind of have that connection through the music that you had when I was growing up.
I grew up and we had hymnals in our church, and that's what we read out of. A lot of people, just read the word. There's 4 parts written out, and I knew enough before that I could read the notes. And even like in middle school and high school, in church, I would read the notes. But I think a lot of times now is just reading the words and now reading up on the screen, because a lot of times now they'll just have words up on the screen, especially for contemporary, because that it's not something that has been somewhat, I guess, standardized in a hymn setting.
It was almost a requirement that we read music. And to me, even the contemporary music, the modern worship music, I can still hear the harmonies, so I still sing them, but a lot of people don't have an ear for music, so they don't hear all of the parts. And I just feel like, and it's old because I'm old, I get it, and I'm turning into that person, but there's something about, Lord, I sound like I'm 400 years old when I say this, but there's something that's home about those hymns, and something I always thought was interesting, and jump in anytime you'd like. Something I thought was really interesting, and I actually mentioned this to my dad. The hymns that we sang in the sings were very heaven focused. It was, we're having a hard time here, we're struggling, but heaven's coming. And they were very hopeful in that heaven is coming. And there's differences in themes through the years as well. I don't know, it just feels like home.
There's also a difference in the instruments used.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, whenever I was younger, it was very traditional style church with a choir, an organ, piano, and the congregation reading out of hymnals. And so it's traditional music, traditional harmonies, but whenever I was in 9th grade, my Methodist church started the contemporary service, so my family moved to going to that service where it's more modern songs, 4-chord songs. But I can just remember, like, whenever I was younger, my mom was always complaining about how loud the organ was every Sunday. And like, now she kind of misses it. Now that we've been going to the contemporary service for 4 or 5 years, she misses the organ, even though she complained about it a lot whenever I was growing up. And now it's just like a guitar, maybe keyboards, maybe a drum kit, or a rain stick, different types of percussion. Instead of a choir, it's 3 or 4 singers, maybe. So like the style of the music is very different with the instruments that are used.
Yeah, and I kind of want to talk about how up until maybe late 80s, early 90s, it was mostly traditional music. And it was kind of traditional as in, this is how we've done it since whenever, and we're going to keep doing it like this. But then I guess there's more progressive people that started saying, hey, maybe we should do something new, maybe do something that appeals to a different type of people. And now that's been a big thing, but I think there's somewhat an urge to go back to the traditional type. A lot of the contemporary type worship music is incorporating hymns in it.
Another thing that I've noticed in the switch from the traditional style of worship to the modern style of worship is it feels like sometimes it's switched from a corporate worship setting to a concert setting.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating, especially as the person leading worship, because that's not your intent and that's not your desire. But like even Sunday morning in church, I'm singing loud, and I looked around and I was like, dude, like no, sing. Like I know you people know this music, sing. So I don't know where that disconnect happens, but it feels like in every contemporary service I've been in, because of the instrumentation, because of the sound system, it's harder to get a corporate worship feel. But you said something about wanting to go back. My dad was a pastor in Destin, at Destin First Methodist Church. They have their traditional worship service in their sanctuary, and they have their contemporary worship service in their gym, of course. But it's beautiful. They've set it up really nicely. So the age majority in their contemporary service is 60 and above. It's an older congregation.
Wow.
Their traditional worship is college students and young families. And they said that the young families want the traditional worship. And the dad used to call them it's like the hippie generation, the Grateful Dead generation want the band. They want the drums and they want the loud stuff. But the younger families are going back to
Right. Yeah.
I remember these songs when I was growing up.
I can remember whenever I was younger, Sunday morning church service was for like traditional music, but every other thing that I went to regarding church had like a contemporary style music. So like kids clubs on Wednesdays, it was kid songs about God, not hymns. And like whenever I was in my mom's car picking up friends or anything, it was contemporary songs. But on Sunday morning, that was reserved for traditional style music. And so eventually I think the contemporary music came to the church in its main service, and now I guess it's slowly like hymns are in our cars now, and they're in our other services now. Not strictly hymns, they're mixed with the contemporary music like you talked about. I don't know, maybe hymns will come back completely. With my church being in the city, I see a difference between that and a few like country churches that I've been to, where the style of music is very different. I feel like country churches, less in an urban setting, are, well, the one I went to, it did have more traditional style elements to it. Like hymns were sung, more people knew music. Music was very important, but it, like you said, it was leading towards the sermon, and afterwards you eat food and you may sing again that night, and like you have everyone's family who they sing hymns for the church and take turns. It's just like everybody knows everybody and is singing together that traditional style music.
My church back home that I grew up in was all traditional type service with hymns and everything, and now they have a worship band that plays every Sunday morning, and they'll start off the service by singing a few hymns and then have announcements and take up offering and everything, and then they'll have like maybe 3 songs or so that's with the band. So they incorporate kind of both. It's more of they're incorporating more modern worship tunes in their traditional service, which I think is kind of like a middle ground, which I think is good though, because it keeps the church together in the same service, in the same community. I think that's what church is all about. Anyways, yeah, I think we've had some very good discussions.
Good talk.
In this time. We've posed some really interesting ideas and how we think church music is, affecting us and affecting the church. So thank you all for talking with
Thank
me.
you for having us.
Yeah, it was great.